What if the man who promised to save you was the same man who bought you just to break you? Stick around, because this story will take you somewhere you never expected. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable journeys. They say you'll remember your wedding day for the rest of your life. I just never expected mine to start with thunder shaking the glass walls of Windermere Hall and the distant hum of strangers whispering my price. I wasn't wearing white, not really. The dress they gave me was closer to bone than ivory, tight at the waist, heavy on the shoulders, as if it knew I was walking toward a life I hadn't chosen. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, staring at the long stretch of marble leading to a man I barely knew, but was now bound to call my husband. I should have felt something: fear, anger, shame. Instead, all I could think about was the rain. It hadn't stopped for hours. The old windows of the mansion rattled with every gust of winter wind, as if the walls themselves were trying to warn me. Every inch of this place smelled like damp, cedar, and old money, like something that could swallow me whole if I took one more step. And yet, I did. The ceremony wasn't in a chapel. There were no friends, no music, no family gathered to celebrate. Just a lawyer, a witness, and Adrian King standing in front of the cold stone hearth, his hands in his pockets, staring into the flames like this was just another transaction on his calendar. Maybe it was. I swallowed hard, my heels clicking softly on the floor, each step echoing louder in my head than in the cavernous silence around us. My mother should have been here. Weak as she was, she should have been the one holding my hand, reminding me that this was for the family, that it was worth it. But she wasn't. She was at home, hooked to a heart monitor we couldn't afford anymore, holding on to life by a thread I was too powerless to strengthen. And that's why I was here. The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the thick silence. Adrian Michael King, do you take Amelia Rose Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife? He didn't even glance at me. His voice, deep and smooth, cut through the air like a blade. I do. It sounded more like a closing statement than a vow. The lawyer turned to me. I opened my mouth, but the words lodged in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut for half a breath, reaching for something, anything, to ground me. My fingers found the edge of my pearl bracelet, my mother's bracelet. I remembered her voice humming softly in the kitchen, the smell of toasted bread and cinnamon filling the air. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. I used to hate that song. Now, I'd give anything to hear it again. I blinked back the burn in my throat. I do, I whispered, barely louder than the storm outside. We exchanged rings, mine simple, his heavy and gold, and when the lawyer pronounced us husband and wife, Adrian didn't so much as flinch. He didn't offer his arm. He didn't kiss me. He just turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment, alone in front of strangers, wondering how I'd ended up as a footnote in someone else's story. That's when I noticed it, the envelope sitting on the mantel, sealed with the old Bennett family crest. It wasn't there before. I glanced around. No one seemed to notice. My heart pounded as I crossed the room, slipping the envelope into the folds of my dress when no one was looking. Adrian was already halfway up the staircase. I followed, the letter burning like a weight against my ribs. He didn't wait for me at the top. He turned left toward the west wing, leaving me standing alone in the dimly lit hallway. I ducked into the nearest sitting room, my hands shaking as I broke the wax. Seal, my mother's handwriting blurred as tears welled in my eyes. Amelia, if you're reading this, it means I never told you the truth. About him. About what he did for me years ago. I pressed my hand to my chest, my heart pounding louder than the rain. I read on, my throat tightening with every word. You were just a little girl when it happened. I had collapsed in the street outside the bookshop. No one stopped. No one cared. except for one boy. A boy with dark eyes and a torn jacket, who carried me to the hospital and sat with me until I woke up. I choked on a breath. His name was Adrian King. The letter slipped from my fingers, floating to the floor like the final thread of a life I thought I understood. I pressed my hand to the window, staring into the storm outside. I'd spent the whole day thinking I was just a pawn in a debt my family owed. But what if I was wrong? What if I'd been his unfinished story all along? I spent most of that night pacing the hallway, clutching my mother's letter like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I read it 3 times, tracing every shaky line of her handwriting, until the ink blurred in my vision. Adrian had saved her, not just once, but in ways I was only beginning to understand. So why did it feel like I was still just another name on a contract to him? The storm outside had dulled to a steady drizzle by the time I gathered the nerve to follow him down the west wing. Every step I took echoed in my chest, louder than it should have been in the quiet of that vast, empty mansion. I found the door half open, a sliver of golden light spilling into the hallway. I didn't knock. I pushed it open, expecting him to be asleep or gone, or anywhere but standing by the fireplace with his back to me, rolling something between his fingers. It was a scarf. Not just any scarf. The old knitted one my mother had made me when I was 12. The one I thought I'd lost years ago. I froze, in the doorway, my breath catching. How did you... My voice cracked before I could finish. Adrian didn't turn around. He held the scarf a moment longer before folding it carefully and placing it on the mantel, like it was something sacred. "It's late," he said quietly. "You should rest." I wanted to ask why he had it, why he'd kept it all these years, but the words tangled in my throat, heavy and useless. I stood there, clutching the letter, until he finally turned to face me. For the first time since the ceremony, his eyes met mine, and I hated how steady he looked, as if none of this touched him at all. He gestured toward the far side of the room. "The guest suite is through that door. You'll be comfortable there." Comfortable. Like I was a guest in my own marriage. I swallowed hard, gripping the letter tighter. "Is that it?" I whispered. "That's all you have to say?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the room in 2 slow strides, stopping just short of reaching me. He looked down at the letter in my hand, then back at me. "You shouldn't have read that." I flinched like he'd slapped me. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. An apology maybe, a reason, something real, but not this. Not this wall he kept between us, as solid as the stone around this mansion. "It's the truth, isn't it?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "You saved her. You saved us." "Why?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed, but when he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "It doesn't matter. It does to me." The air between us crackled, heavy and sharp, like the moment before a match flares to life. I stepped closer, daring to bridge the distance he seemed so determined to keep. "Why, Adrian?" He turned away before I could finish, running a hand through his dark hair like the question burned more than he could handle. I took another step, desperate to understand what game we were playing. But when he finally spoke again, his voice was ice. "You think this changes anything?" His back was still to me. "This marriage isn't about the past. It's about a debt. That's all it's ever been." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "A debt you already paid." He laughed bitterly, the sound cutting straight through me. "That's where you're wrong," he said, turning to face me again. "The debt isn't mine. It's yours." I shook my head, not understanding. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your family took everything from mine," he said, each word like a stone in my chest. "My father, my name, everything I was supposed to have. And your mother. His voice broke for the first time. Your mother. Let me walk away with nothing but that scarf. I couldn't breathe. You think I bought you because I wanted to? His voice cracked again, lower this time, almost a whisper. I bought you because it was the only way to finish what they started. My knees went weak, but I didn't move. I couldn't. His words settled like dust on old furniture. Unshakable, unavoidable. He crossed the room again, slower this time, until we were only inches apart. His breath brushed my cheek, warm and unsteady. You want to know the truth, Amelia? His voice dropped to something dark, something dangerous. He leaned in, his mouth at my ear. I bought you to own the thing they never let me have. I flinched, tears blurring my vision. And what is that? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't give me a chance to run. You. The word hung between us, heavier than any vow. He stepped back, leaving me standing there, shaking in the doorway. Get some rest, he said again, his voice hollow. You'll need it. And just like that, he walked away, leaving me alone with nothing but a letter, a scarf, and the terrifying realization that the man I thought had saved me might have only been waiting to destroy me. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. The scarf lay folded at the foot of the bed, its frayed edges catching the pale light of dawn seeping through the heavy velvet curtains. I couldn't stop staring at it, couldn't stop wondering if any of this had ever been real. I should have hated him. I told myself that 1,000 times. But hatred doesn't keep you awake all night with a knot in your stomach, does it? Hatred doesn't make you ache for answers. When the sky turned from gray to pale gold, I slipped out of the guest suite and padded barefoot down the hall toward the east wing. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't sit in that room another second. The door to his study was cracked open. I paused in the hallway, heart pounding. I shouldn't have gone in. But I did. The room was bathed in soft morning light, casting long shadows across the walls lined with old books and leather-bound ledgers. Adrian sat at the desk, head in his hands, fingers tangled in his hair like he was trying to hold himself together. I almost turned around. Almost pretended I hadn't seen him like this. But something in me broke. Adrian. He flinched like my voice had struck him. Slowly, he looked up. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw it. Raw, unfiltered pain written all over. His face. What are you doing here? His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept either. I crossed the room before I could think better of it, standing on the other side of the desk. We need to talk. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest like armor. There's nothing left to say. I ignored him. You said you bought me to finish what they started, I whispered, my throat tightening. But you didn't. Finish anything, did you? His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. I pressed on, my voice shaking. You said you wanted to own me, but you've done nothing but push me away. His eyes darkened, but there was something else there now. Something more fragile. You don't understand, he rasped. Then help me, I whispered, stepping around the desk. Help me understand why you're still hurting after all these years. Why you still wear that pain like a second skin. He stood so suddenly I flinched, but he didn't touch me. He just stood there, breathing hard, like he was holding something back. I waited for you, he finally said, his voice breaking. I waited for years. I watched you grow up, watched you live your life like none of it had touched you. And all I could do was stand in the shadows, waiting for a chance to belong somewhere again. My breath hitched. You were just a girl, he whispered, his voice cracking. And I was nothing. I didn't have a name worth anything after what your father did to mine. But I kept that scarf. I kept it because it was the only thing that ever felt like home. Tears blurred my vision. I told myself I'd move on, that I'd build something bigger, better, that I'd make them regret ever throwing me away. And I did, Amelia. I built an empire. I made them crawl to me for help. His chest rose and fell like a man drowning. But none of it mattered. None of it ever mattered. Because it wasn't you. The air between us crackled, thick with something I couldn't name. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break, through my ribs. You don't have to keep punishing yourself, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. Or me. He reached for me then, slowly, like he was afraid I might disappear. And when his hand finally cupped my cheek, I broke. Don't know how to stop, he whispered, his voice shaking. I don't know how to let go of all of it. I covered his hand with mine, pressing my face into his palm like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Start with me, I whispered back. Start with right now. His breath hitched, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I'm not good at this, he murmured, leaning closer until our foreheads touched. I don't know how to be what you deserve. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking on the words I didn't know I needed to say. Just be here. And in that moment, broken, messy, unfinished, we were more real than we'd ever been. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me tight against his chest. He held me like I was the only thing keeping him standing, and I held him back, because maybe I was. We stayed like that, just breathing, for what felt like forever. I didn't know where. We ended and the silence began. I only knew that for the first time since I walked into this house, I didn't feel like I was standing alone in the cold. But peace never lasts long in houses like this. A knock shattered the moment. 2 sharp raps against the door, like a verdict being delivered. Adrian's arms stiffened around me. Stay here, he whispered against my hair. But I caught the shift in his voice, the tightening, the armor sliding back into place. He crossed the room and opened the door only a crack. I couldn't see who was on the other side, but I heard the voice, smooth, sharp, and laced with something poisonous. Well, isn't this cozy? Adrian didn't answer. Are you going to invite me in, little brother? The voice taunted. Adrian's jaw tensed. He stepped aside just enough to let the man enter. Tall, impeccably dressed, smiling like a shark. Edward King. I knew his face from magazine covers and financial news. King Enterprises' golden heir. The real king, not the shadow I'd married. He turned his eyes on me, that smile curling like smoke. So this is the girl who cost you everything, he said smoothly, looking me over like I was a painting he didn't quite care for. Can't say I'm impressed. Adrian stepped between us without a word, his body tight as a wire. Edward chuckled, walking to the desk like he owned the room. I thought you'd come to your senses by now, but here you are, playing house with the Bennetts' little charity. Case. Adrian's fists clenched at his sides. What do you want, Edward? Edward leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. You know exactly what I want. You think the board's going to let you keep playing this game forever. You married her to save your pride, but it's time to make a choice. Adrian didn't move, didn't blink. Edward's smile sharpened. Annul the marriage. Sign over. Your shares. Walk away clean. I'll make sure the board forgets this ever happened. I felt the blood drain from my face. Adrian's silence stretched like a noose tightening around my throat. He wasn't answering. He wasn't fighting. Edward pushed off the desk and walked toward him, lowering his voice just enough that I had to strain to hear. You were never meant to have it all, Adrian. You were the mistake, the afterthought. You know it. I know it. And she'll know it soon enough. Adrian's knuckles turned white, but he still didn't speak. Edward's gaze flicked to me, cold and triumphant. "Pack your things, darling," he sneered. "The fairy tale's over." I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Edward walked to the door, pausing just long enough to deliver one last blow. "Father would be so proud of you," he hissed. "Giving up everything, for nothing." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing us in the thick, suffocating silence. I waited for Adrian to turn around, to tell me Edward was wrong, that he wouldn't give me up like I was nothing. But he didn't. He just stood there, shoulders hunched, staring at the door like he'd already lost. I crossed the room, my voice shaking. "Say something." He flinched but still didn't face me. "Adrian," I whispered, the weight of it crushing me. "Tell me he's wrong." His breath hitched, low and ragged. "I don't know how to fight him without losing you." He whispered so softly I almost didn't hear him. I reached for him, my hand trembling as I touched his back. "You already are." He turned then, his face wrecked with something I couldn't name. "I swore I wouldn't do this to you," he choked out. "I swore I wouldn't drag you into my war." "You didn't drag me," I whispered, blinking back tears. "I walked into it. For you." He looked at me like I was the last thing holding him together. "I can't ask you to stay." I stepped closer, pressing my palm to his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath my fingers. "Then don't ask," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But know that I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me to." His breath caught, eyes wide, like he wasn't sure if he could believe me. I swallowed hard, searching his face. "I'm not a pawn, Adrian. Not anymore. And I won't let him take you from me." His hands trembled as they closed over mine, pulling me tight against him like he was afraid I might vanish. "I've already lost too much," he whispered against my hair. "I can't lose you too." I held him tighter, feeling the dam inside him start to break. "Then fight for me," I whispered back. "Fight for us." And for the first time since I walked into this house, I felt him breathe. Really breathe. Adrian didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. The clock on the mantel ticked softly as I lay curled on the sofa near the dying fire, my thoughts twisting into knots I couldn't untangle. I kept hearing Edward's voice, smooth and cutting. "Pack your things, darling. The fairy tale's over." And Adrian's silence. That was what hurt the most. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't fought back. I told myself I wouldn't cry. But at some point in the darkness, the tears found me anyway. The scarf lay draped across my lap, the soft wool catching the firelight as I ran my fingers over the frayed edges. I tried to remember what it had felt like back then, when life had been simpler, smaller, full of dreams that didn't cost this much to keep. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard his footsteps. Slow, hesitant, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome in his own home. I didn't move. He stopped behind me, his breath unsteady. "I never wanted you to hear any of that." I swallowed the lump in my throat. But I did. Silence stretched between us, brittle and fragile. I turned, meeting his eyes. He looked defeated. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" I asked softly. "For not fighting for me? Or for dragging me into something you never intended? To finish?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I thought I could protect you," he rasped. "I thought if I kept you at arm's length, Edward wouldn't touch you, wouldn't use you against me." "And what about me, Adrian?" My voice broke Did you ever think I might be standing here wanting you to let me in? He raked a hand through his hair, pacing like a man on the edge of something he couldn't name. I've spent my whole life being used, Amelia. By my father, by Edward, by the family who taught me that love was nothing but leverage. I stood, slowly, the scarf slipping from my lap to the floor. I'm not leverage, I whispered. He stopped cold. I'm not a pawn in your war. I continued, stepping closer. I'm not a piece to be sacrificed on your board. He closed his eyes like the weight of my words physically hurt him. I know, he breathed. I know you're not. I reached for him, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. Then, prove it, I whispered. Prove that I'm more than a debt you had to pay. He opened his eyes, raw and wrecked, like I'd just shattered the last piece of armor he had left. And in that moment, I saw the boy I used to catch glimpses of, the boy with haunted eyes who used to stand outside my mother's bookshop, too, afraid to come inside. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. I stepped closer, until there was nothing between us but air, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Start with the truth, I whispered. Start with me. His hands trembled as they lifted to cup my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized had fallen. I've already given up everything once, he breathed. I can't do it again. My heart cracked wide open. Then don't, I whispered back. But this time, don't do it alone. He pulled me into his arms, holding me like he was terrified I'd slip through his fingers. I pressed my face into his chest, breathing him in, the scent of cedar, soap, and something uniquely him. For the first time, I felt him holding on, not like I was a shield, but like I was something he couldn't bear to lose. And then, without letting go, he whispered the words I never expected to hear. I'll call the board tomorrow. I froze. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. I'll give it all up, Amelia. The shares, the name, the company, all of it. My breath caught. Adrian, no. His hand tightened on mine. I should have done it years ago, he whispered. I've spent my whole life chasing something that was never really mine to begin with. Tears burned in my throat. But if you give it all up, what will you have left? He leaned his forehead against mine, his voice breaking on the answer. You. The word shattered me. He kissed me then, not like the man who had bought me, or the one who had tried to keep me, at a distance, but like the boy who had carried my mother to the hospital all those years ago, like the man who had waited in the shadows for far too long, like someone who had finally found his way home. The rain returned the next evening, soft at first, then steady, pounding against the tall windows of Windermere Hall like the house itself was trembling. I stood by the window, watching the sky darken, wrapping my arms around myself as though that might hold me together. Adrian hadn't spoken much since the morning. He'd spent hours on the phone, his voice low and steady, arranging what sounded like the end of everything he'd built, the end of his family's legacy. Because of me. I kept telling myself this wasn't my fault, but deep down, I wasn't. Sure, I believed it. When the last of the calls ended, he didn't come to me. He stayed locked in his office, door shut tight like a wall between us. And the more the rain fell, the more I felt that old ache creeping back in. The ache of not being enough. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a small bag, just enough to leave without waking him. I told myself it was for the best, that walking away would be the only gift I had left to give him. I made it to the front door before I heard it. His voice, raw and broken. Don't. I froze, my fingers tightening around the doorknob. Amelia, he whispered again, closer this time. Please, Don't go. I turned slowly, my throat closing at the sight of him standing there, barefoot, disheveled, wrecked. I can't watch you lose everything. Because of me, I choked out. I won't let you. He crossed the space between us in 3 strides, grabbing the bag from my hand and tossing it aside like it was nothing. His hands cupped my face, his breath shaky as he leaned his forehead against mine. I'm not losing anything, he whispered. Unless you walk out that door. Tears blurred my vision. I don't know how to stay, I whispered back. Not when it feels like I'm just another thing you'll have to let go. His hands trembled against my cheeks. I let go of everything else, he rasped. But not you. Never you. The dam inside me cracked wide open. I buried my face in his chest, clutching his shirt like it was the only thing keeping me upright. And in the quiet that wrapped around us, I heard it. The sound I never thought I'd hear. He was crying. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, broken gasps against my hair. Like he'd finally run out of ways to hold himself together, I pulled back, framing his face in my hands. Adrian, I whispered. Look at me. He did. And when our eyes met, I saw it. All of it. The boy who had lost his family. The man who had built a fortress around his heart. The soul that had been waiting, all this time, for someone to see him. I stood on my toes, brushing my lips softly against his. I'm here, I whispered, and I'm not leaving. The breath he let out sounded like a prayer. Without another word, he grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the front door. I didn't ask where we were going. I just followed, heart pounding. The rain hit us like a wave the moment we stepped outside, cold and relentless, soaking us to the bone in seconds. But Adrian didn't stop. He pulled me down the steps, out into the open lawn, spinning me toward him like we were the only 2 people in the world. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. He cupped my face, brushing the wet hair from my cheeks. I thought I had to let you go to keep you safe, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't. I won't. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my throat. You don't have to, I whispered back. His forehead pressed to mine, his breath warm against my lips. I'm scared, he admitted softly. So am I whispered. But I'm more scared of losing you. His hands tightened around me, pulling me flush against him as the rain poured down. I need you, Amelia, he breathed, his voice cracking. More than I've ever needed anything in my life. I felt my heart shatter and mend all at once. I'm yours, I whispered. I've been yours all along. And then he kissed me, not like the man who had bought me, not like the man who had tried to push me away, but like the man who had finally found what he'd been searching for. We stood there in the rain, holding on like we'd both just realized what we had to lose. And I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't going anywhere. We left Windermere Hall the next morning. No warning, no packed bags. Just the 2 of us in Adrian's car, driving through winding country roads, windows fogged by our breath and silence. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't need to. When he pulled into the gravel driveway of my mother's little cottage, my throat tightened. It had been months since I'd been back here. The garden was overgrown, the porch light flickering, but it still smelled like home, faintly of lavender and wood smoke. Adrian turned off the engine but didn't move to open his door. He sat there, staring straight ahead, like he was afraid to break the moment. I reached over and laced my fingers with his. You're here now, I whispered. That's all that matters. His jaw tightened, but he nodded, squeezing my hand like it was the only anchor he had left. We carried nothing, but each other through the front door. I flicked on the light in the kitchen, the soft hum of the old bulbs filling the quiet. It felt smaller than I remembered. The walls were chipped, the counters worn, but it smelled like memory, like the mornings I used to sit at this very table, watching Mom hum to herself as she brewed coffee in the old French press I moved to, the shelf above the stove, pulling down that same chipped ceramic pot, my hands moving on muscle memory alone. Adrian leaned in the doorway, silent but watching. I could feel his eyes on me as I measured the coffee grounds, added hot water, and pressed the plunger down with both hands. The simple rhythm of it calmed something jagged inside me. I turned, holding the mug between my palms. "Sit," I whispered. He hesitated, but eventually crossed the room, settling into the same chair my mother had once claimed as hers. I slid the mug across the table to him. He took it with both hands, holding it like it was something fragile. "I used to watch you from the window," he murmured, staring into the steam. "All those years ago. You'd sit right here, swinging your feet, humming while your mom made breakfast." I sank into the chair across from him, my throat tightening. "You never came in," I whispered. He shook his head slowly. "I didn't think I was allowed." Tears stung my eyes. "You were just a boy," I whispered. "You shouldn't have had to stand in the cold." He looked up then, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "I didn't mind," he said softly, "because standing here felt closer than anywhere else." I reached across the table, my fingers brushing over his. "And now?" I whispered. His breath hitched, his hands wrapping around mine. "Now, I don't ever want to stand on the outside again." The words wrapped around my heart like a ribbon, tying all the broken pieces back together. I stood slowly, rounding the table until I was beside him. He turned in his chair, looking up at me like I was something he didn't dare touch. But I reached for him anyway. I slid onto his lap, curling my fingers into his hair as I pressed my forehead to his. He let out a shaky breath, his arms wrapping tight around my waist. "This is all I've ever wanted," he whispered. "Just you, here, with me." I felt my heart stutter, a tear slipping down my cheek. "I'm scared to believe it's real," I admitted. He kissed the tear away, his voice breaking. "Then let me show you." He stood, carrying me like I weighed nothing, and I didn't protest. I buried my face in his neck as he carried me down the narrow hallway to the little bedroom at the end, the room that had once been mine. We didn't need marble floors or crystal chandeliers. We didn't need contracts or bloodlines or family names. We just needed this. The soft creak of the old bed frame, the smell of fresh coffee still lingering in the air, the quiet hum of two hearts learning how to beat as one. And when he held me that night, skin to skin, breath to breath, it wasn't about debt or revenge or ownership. It was about us. It had always been about us. We stayed at the cottage longer than we should have. Long enough to remember what it felt like to be just Amelia and Adrian, two people without titles, without history pressing down on our shoulders. But reality always finds its way back. The call came just after breakfast. Edward had called for an emergency board meeting. Adrian didn't flinch when he hung up. He simply stood, crossed the room, and took my hand. "I want you there," he whispered, his voice steady in a way that made my heart ache. "Are you sure?" I asked softly. His jaw clenched, but he nodded. "If I'm walking away, I'm not doing it alone." We drove to the King Enterprises headquarters in the heart of Manhattan. The towering glass building looked like it had swallowed the sky. I'd passed it 1,000 times before, but this time, I wasn't just another face on the sidewalk. I was walking into the belly of the beast. The boardroom was colder than I imagined it would be. Long glass walls, leather chairs, and men in dark suits who barely glanced up when we entered. Edward stood at the head of the table, hands folded like a man already savoring his victory. Adrian didn't pause. He pulled out the chair beside him for me, lacing our fingers together on top of the polished oak surface. Gasps rippled around the room, but Edward's smirk never wavered. "Well, look who finally decided to play house in public," Edward sneered. Adrian didn't respond. He waited until the room quieted before he stood, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I know why you called this meeting," he began. "And I know what you expect me to do." Edward leaned back, folding his arms. "You've made this personal, Adrian," Edward taunted. "And the board doesn't tolerate personal mistakes." Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice never wavered. "You're right," he said quietly. "I made this personal a long time ago." A murmur spread through the room. Adrian turned to face me, his hand tightening around mine. I spent years believing that the King name was all I had, that the company, the power, that it could somehow fill the space they left behind. My breath caught, my heart pounding. "But it was never enough," he whispered. "Because the truth is, I lost the only thing that ever mattered long before this company ever knew my name." He turned back to the board, standing taller than I'd ever seen him. "My name doesn't define me. This company doesn't define me. And I refuse to spend one more day proving myself to men who never saw me as anything but a mistake." Gasps echoed around the table, Edward's face twisted into something dark, something furious. "Don't be a fool," Edward snapped. "You walk out that door, and you're nothing." Adrian turned, pulling me to my feet. "No," he said softly. "For the first time, I'm free." Without another word, he led me from the room, the weight of every eye following us as we crossed the glass threshold. He didn't stop until we reached the street, the cold wind biting at our skin. I turned. To him, my throat tight. "Are you sure?" I whispered. He cupped my face, his eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he breathed. I threw my arms around him, holding on like I never planned to let go. And in that moment, I knew. We had nothing. No empire, no legacy, no crown, just each other. And for the first time, that was enough. We didn't return to Windermere Hall. We didn't need to. The cottage was more than enough. The first few days after Adrian walked away from the King Empire felt strangely light, like we were breathing cleaner air than either of us had in years. No headlines, no board meetings, no shadows hanging over us. Just mornings that smelled like fresh coffee and sunlight spilling through cracked windows. I thought I might wake up one day and feel the weight of what we'd lost. But I didn't. Neither did he. We laughed more, talked more. Sometimes we just sat on the porch in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees. One morning, as I leaned over the stove pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs, I glanced toward the table and froze. Adrian was sitting there, holding something in his hand. My mother's silver ring, the same one she used to wear every day until her hands grew too frail to keep it on. My throat tightened. I found it in the drawer. "By your bed," Adrian said softly, standing to meet me halfway across the kitchen. I wanted to wait until the right moment. Tears stung my eyes as he slipped it onto my finger, right above the simple gold band he'd placed there the day we married. This time, it felt real. It felt ours. He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "I don't need an empire," he whispered. "I just need you. This, right here. This is my home." I choked on a breath, leaning into him. "I used to think being yours meant giving up who I was," I whispered. "But you've given me more than I ever dreamed of. His forehead rested against mine. "You gave me something I never had," he breathed. "A place to belong." And I knew, in every fiber of my being, that this was what we'd been, searching for all along. Not power, not revenge, not redemption, just each other. Later that night, as the sun dipped low over the trees, painting the sky in gold and lavender, I sat at the small writing desk in the corner of our bedroom. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write, something I hadn't done in years. "Mama, you once told me that love isn't something you find in grand gestures or perfect people. You told me it's the quiet moments, the soft places where two broken hearts find a way to fit together. You were right. Adrian and I have lost so much. But somewhere in that loss, we found the only thing that really matters. Home isn't a place or a name. It's a person. And I've finally found mine." I sealed the letter and placed it on the windowsill, letting the moonlight wash over it like a silent blessing. Adrian came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What did you write?" he whispered. I turned, lacing my fingers with his. "Just a promise," I murmured. He smiled, pulling me into him, kissing me softly, like we had all the time in the world. And we did. We had every sunrise left to wake up to, every cup of coffee to share, every quiet night to hold each other close. And when he whispered, "You're my everything," I knew I'd never stop believing it. Because in the end, it wasn't about the empire. It wasn't about the name. It was about us, and that was worth everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We have so many more heartfelt journeys waiting to be shared with you. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to see you in the next story.